Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hans-Peter Manz. I'm the Austrian ambassador to the United States, and therefore, as I was asking, do we have that better? Okay. Don't touch it anymore. To repeat, I'm Hans-Peter Manz. I'm the Austrian ambassador to the United States, and therefore, basically the housekeeper here. I welcome you all. It's great to see such a wonderful turnout for tonight's unique event. This is a first-time effort, and I'm thrilled and delighted and really curious to know what's going to be done here today. I have not the slightest idea what's going to come out of this. No, which is as it should be. I mean, this is what the whole thing is all about, as far as I understand it. We have enough of these other meetings here in Washington and elsewhere, where we already know what the outcome will be, and we can basically write the notes and take them home before even going there. This is definitely not happening tonight. I love the subject because it allows room for just about everything, and it's truly philosophical in the sense that, but of course, it sounds more cutting edge if you talk about science and technology and in the arts and society. But it is about philosophy. It's about what do we know, what do we want to know, where can we go, not necessarily where do we came from, but at least, you know, what our next frontiers are going to be. And I'm institutionally thrilled, which is of course my privilege as a civil servant, that we have the cooperation of a number of institutions, very important institutions to us, and this is also a first for our friends from the Salzburg Global Seminar. I have to name them first because I'm on the board there. An important institution in Austria that's been around for decades and doing great work, maybe not that well known here in Washington yet to the general public, but that should change tonight. So spread the word. These guys know what they're doing. And we are privileged to have the cooperation of the seminar with the National Endowment of the Arts, which I think is absolutely great to have that here. And as an official seal of approval, so to speak, you will notice the banner over there. This is part of the EU Rendezvous series. And so part of the presentation of the European Union in Washington, which means that they do take this seriously on this one. Again, I'm very glad you're here. Welcome. Enjoy the evening. And it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Rocco Landesmann from the NEA to give you further insight in what's about to happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, how's this? He's taller. Thank you so much, Ambassador Manz, for hosting us at the embassy here and for helping to facilitate this U.S.-Austrian dialogue. It's always great to look out and see a full house. I'm a recovering producer, and good box office is always welcome. Events like this are exactly what is so wonderful about working in Washington, D.C. and having access to colleagues from around the globe. Penny Ojeda, our Director of International Work, would love to do even more together, and I look forward to that possibility. The NEA is also thrilled to be formally partnering with the Salzburg Global Seminar for the first time. Certainly, NEA officials have participated in discrete seminars, but this is the first time that we've been able to come together to plan and execute a program of mutual interest. My wife, Debbie Landesmann, was the first person to introduce me to Stephen Salyer, sitting next to her, and as usual, everything goes exceedingly well when I do exactly what Debbie tells me to do. I should add that the opposite is also true. I'm also thrilled that one of the members of our National Council on the Arts is here with us tonight. Barbara Prey is a visual artist and one with a strong connection to this evening's theme. Barbara was commissioned by NASA to paint 4 pictures for their collection, including portraits, the International Space Station, 2 of the space shuttles, and the X-43, the world's fastest aircraft. I'm now going to do something that is always risky, which is going off script, and I will point out that Barbara is not only relevant to today's discussion, she's also one of my favorite painters. At the NEA, because we are the National Endowment for the Arts, I've elected to put up actual pictures, paintings, And there are 6 of my father's and 1 of Barbara Prey's, and those are the only paintings we have in my offices. So Barbara, I look forward to there you are, I look forward to your thoughts about the panels. Frank Hodsell, one of my predecessors, is also here, and I want to welcome him. He's been incredibly loyal about going to NEA events, and Frank is one of the reasons that I'm here today and that there's an NEA at all. I believe that the NEA is at our best when we operate as a responsive funder, one that stays in close touch with the arts community across the country and watches for the opportunities, challenges, and patterns that emerge. We did this with the theme of creative playmaking, one of our signature initiatives, paying close attention to the ways that communities are using the arts to help shape their social, physical, and economic characters. Another theme is becoming apparent as well. Artists, especially younger ones, are not paying attention to traditional boundaries, neither the ones that separate artistic disciplines, nor the ones that have, perhaps falsely, separated art from science. In fact, a colleague once mused that the arts and sciences have much more in common with one another than either has with the humanities, which is a kind of radical thought, since the arts and sciences are about creation, while the humanities are about critique. I guess Jim Leach and I can debate that over the ensuing years. We have a great number of people who have agreed to join us for this evening's conversation, each one of whom is far more interesting than I could be. So let me end my remarks here and ask Stephen Salyer to add his words of welcome so we can get started. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Rocco, Ambassador Mans, and Chairman Landsman, and of course Debbie Landsman, and all of our guests. We're delighted to have you here. A special welcome to those of you who are Salzburg Fellows who have attended and participated in our programs in Austria. It's always a pleasure to see familiar faces in the audience and to keep this fellowship going that we share. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Salzburg Global Seminar, it's our mission to bring together emerging leaders from every region of the world and to expose them, usually over the course of about a week's time, to the best thinking and experience from across the world on a major topic of global interest. Our objective is to challenge perspectives, to encourage cross-cultural problem solving, and build networks that support our fellows in their roles as change makers. Most of our seminars take place in Salzburg, Austria, at Schloss Leopoldskron, which some of you may know from the movie Sound of Music if you haven't been there in person. I encourage you to learn about our sessions if you think you might be interested by visiting salzburgglobal.org. In addition to sessions in Salzburg, the seminar also holds events across the world, such as the one here tonight, and such as one next week that will be taking place in Cairo with a group of Middle Eastern young leaders, that taking place at the American University of Cairo. Many of these events are shaped by our alumni fellows, and they number more than 21,000 in 156 countries across the earth. These fellows serve as mentors, as content contributors, as talent scouts, and as faculty for our sessions. They are truly partners with the staff and the directors of the seminar in all we do. Frequently, we work in partnership with other leading groups, such as the National Endowment for the Arts and the Austrian Embassy. One notable partner here in Washington has been the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences, with whom we have examined how libraries and museums are changing in an era of participatory culture. Partnerships like these allow us to touch on creative intersections less explored by other think tanks and policy centers, and for us, lie at the center rather than the periphery of our program. I also want to particularly thank Rocco and Hans-Peter for their enthusiastic support of this event here tonight. And this intersection of science and the arts, and a subject which I think has obviously drawn many of you here tonight, is one that I hope we can examine not just this evening, but successively over time in a myriad of ways. Our immediate past chairman, Walter Massey, who was at one time the chairman of the the head of the National Science Foundation, director, and now heads the Art Institute School in Chicago, was very sorry that he couldn't be here tonight, and because he's long pressed me to look at this topic of the intersection of art and science. As a physicist and now as someone who is trying to run an art school, I think he is very much aware that these are worlds that don't always connect and yet that have so much to say to one another. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Amanda McDonald Crowley, and ask if she would join Liz Lerman and Drew Baden at the table. If you could welcome them.
Thank you, Stephen, Rocco, and Hans-Peter for such wonderful introductions to both the conversation and to this evening. I'm really excited and honoured to be able to moderate this discussion, mostly because I've been able to have fantastic conversations over the last few weeks with an extraordinary array of people who will be presenting here this evening. The first panel that we're going to present as part of this evening's conversation is, for me, really a wonderful way to start, is because it's a case study between a brilliant and lovely artist who I've only just come to know, Liz Lerman, a choreographer who thinks deeply about the body and movement, but also thinks about the world that we live in and how her work collides with that. And with Andrew Baden, a physicist who I've also only recently come to know, and had the conversation between the two of them and how they came to connect and to produce work together and to think together, I think is an interesting one. So for the arc of the evening's conversation, I think it's really wonderful that we begin with a case study between individuals, an artist and a scientist working in this field. So perhaps, Liz, you can introduce the project and then we'll begin a conversation.
Hi, everybody, and it's wonderful to be here and see you all. I might just echo the ambassador's remarks. What do we know and where do we come from? That was actually the nature of the inquiry for the project we're going to talk about, which is called The Matter of Origins. But appropriately enough, the origin of the project is hard to define. The beginning place is difficult, and I'd like to take you back just a little bit further to the first piece that I made with an explicit science theme called Ferocious Beauty Genome. I worked with geneticists around the country, biologists, and eventually developed a piece that was toured for about 5 years. The piece had already premiered. I liked it a lot. It was the first of these big multimedia pieces, addressing also what Rocco said. Ask a big enough question and you can't solve it with one discipline. You can't. You need more, including our field. So I turned to a lot of help with video artists and text to help it along. But there was one section I particularly loved, and I was particularly struggling with it. In this section, I was trying to find a way to show what happens in the scientific laboratory and how it related to rehearsals. And it was very complex fugue between video dancers and the talking, and I just couldn't get it to work. I was visiting my biologist friend, Bonnie Bassler, at Princeton, and she took me down the hall to meet her colleague, Eric Wieshaus, who's one of our Nobel laureates. He's a fruit fly geneticist. I have to say, by then, I was very comfortable in fruit fly labs. There's a little section in the piece. I consider fruit flies as sort of the 20th century dying swan and the hero of 20th century science. So there was a wonderful little thing I already had about them. So I was happy to look at his fruit flies. But I really wanted to ask him this because I was having such a hard time with this section, which is, how do you ask yourself a question? How is it that a scientist could pick something and say, I'm going to stay on this now, what, for 30 years? The tedium of it, the incredible depth of it. And he looked at me and he said, I'm fueled by my ignorance. And that one comment in some way said everything to me about why there's this deep fascination for scientists and artists. Because ignorance is kind of a wonderful thing. I mean, it can be humiliating. We treat it often as if it's humiliating, but it's not. If you have methods and you have dreams and you have passions, then things start to happen out of that ignorance. So, as I said, this piece toured for a long time. We were at the University of Michigan. I was approached after the performance by a physicist at that school, and he said, we want one. Meaning, give us a piece about physics. And I said, oh, no, I'm done with, no, I'm done. But we made an appointment. And the next day, I went to his office with some of the dancers, and we had set the meeting for 9 o'clock. And of course, we were on time, because we're dancers. And to my surprise, the whole physics department was there, and they were on time. And I know this sounds funny, but actually, it was incredibly meaningful to me. Maybe physicists and dancers had a relationship to time, which of course I've come to see we do. We had an amazing discussion that day, and I was told for the first time about this place called CERN, where they're sending the particles around and smashing them and trying to get to the beginning of the universe. And the physicists in that room really believed that they were going to get to the beginning. And I said, well, that's wonderful, but what about the other origin stories? I wasn't met with derision at all. I was met with this incredible respect about this question that had grown for me over the time, and why I've spent a decade now working with scientists, which is these complex scientific things have implications for human beings. How we feel, how we act, how we behave, how we see our world, and where do we get to work them out? How do we get to think it through? And they were so willing to jump into that with me. And so I went to CERN, which I'll tell you more about, and came back, and then it was a matter of finding partners, and one of the great partners that I had for this project was the University of Maryland, which meant I had to go find the physics department, and that's how I found Drew, and I'm going to let Drew pick it up from here.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here. This is really very different from the usual meetings that I go to. I'm a physicist. I'm actually a physics professor, so I tend to be a little pedantic. I hope you'll have a cane ready.
He told me to kick him if it gets too bad.
And being a physicist is sort of it's a lot like being a priest in a very weird religion. You know, it's clouded in complexity. A lot of people, I meet people on airplanes, they go, oh, I don't understand physics at all. To me, it's simple. You just start at the beginning. And we deal with what we can measure, what we can calculate using whatever mathematics we can use, what we can simulate using computers. So we deal with what we think is true about nature. We're always trying to find out what is true, what do we know, and how do we know it, and how far we can take it. And ultimately, we try and do this from first principles. And that's really how we differ from religion in some basic ways, because religion is very much based on faith, and religion is involved in very important questions of the origin of ethics. And we're involved in physics, and most of science, we're involved with the natural world. And what can we know about the natural world? So when I was a student, I started studying physics, and I really loved it, and I couldn't wait to take my next math course. So you can imagine how nerdy I can be. And it was just fascinating, but I wasn't really thinking this is what I was going to do. And then I had a professor who was teaching me some advanced theoretical physics and a lot of interesting mathematics. And he said something that completely changed my life. He said, okay, now let's go to this equation and you'll see something really beautiful. And I'd never thought that beauty had anything to do with science. I mean, that was beyond me. And it just struck me like a thunderbolt, like, yeah, this stuff really is beautiful, and trying to get to the truth. And and seeing the relationships between things that you never thought were connected at all in mathematics was, to me, extremely beautiful. Everything just sort of fell into place. So I think the NEA chairman was right, that science and art have a huge amount in common. And I think what's in common is very simple. And maybe you'll be surprised to hear this from a physicist, but we both are trying to get to the truth. And neither scientists or artists can really prove when they get there. And when we get there, we might say, ah, that's the truth. And then 5 years later, it's not the truth anymore. This is common, and this is a very healthy thing. You wouldn't want science to be stagnant.
Actually, you know, Drew, that's one of the things I found so interesting when I first started to interact with scientists, was I thought that both art and science had somehow, not necessarily sold the public, but somehow the public had a deep misunderstanding. That they thought, for example, scientists, it's all about facts, 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 and you know, you never interpretive it, and that's why the public gets frustrated when you decide Pluto's not a planet. What do you mean it's not? And they get all upset. But on the other hand, they also think artists are entirely indulgent and full of abandonment and do whatever, when in fact we have enormous rigor. And I often thought one of the reasons to spend time together was to help us each get the public to see the broader side of both of us.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I want to say one more thing about being here in the Austrian embassy. It's very significant to me because this idea that I'm trying to explain, that there's a difference between what's true and what you can prove. And you have to keep trying, but ultimately you need what both scientists and artists have, which is creativity. Sometimes you just have to make a leap, and you have to get there. And the significance for being in this building is that in the early 30s, there was an Austrian mathematician who dealt in logic, who's one of the most accomplished mathematicians of the last 100 years. His name was Kurt Gödel. And he proved an algebraic theorem that proved that you can't, that there's no one-to-one correspondence between proof and truth. That even in the area of mathematics, that there are things that are going to be true that you cannot prove. And when everybody knows this, just because something can't be proved doesn't mean it's not true. You all know that. And just because something is true doesn't mean you can prove it. But he did this mathematically, and I think this is a core concept on how physics and the arts are related, because nobody can really prove that what we're doing is true, and we've gotten to the truth, and nobody can prove that any piece of art is the truth or is good or whatever. It's very subjective. I think that's really significant. And I think that's really something that is going to be important in the future, because, you know, when you see what's going on in computers and neurophysiology, people are learning how the brain works, and that's pretty dangerous. And humans don't have a very good track record of using technology with wisdom. And this kind of stuff is going to change, or could possibly change, what it means to be human. And I think the connection of science and the arts is where we can keep track of who we are and what we are.
I think this troublesome aspect is one of the things that I feel is interesting in an art project, to allow that troublesome side to enter, and then to give our audiences ways to examine this. So in this case, while I was busy investigating the matter of origins, I had also decided to read a book about Robert Oppenheimer, an amazing biography. And there was one page dedicated to this story. When the government took over Los Alamos, they cleared out all of the businesses except for one. It was a little tea house run by a woman named Edith Warner. And Oppenheimer basically hired her to feed the physicists twice a week. In fact, it was a big deal to be able to come off of the plateau that was Los Alamos and come down to her little adobe hut and have a beautiful, humble meal with her. Now, she didn't know what was happening. In fact, she thought Niels Bohr, who was her favorite, was a man named Dr. Baker. She was well known for her chocolate cake. She had a very particular cake that everybody liked. And as I was engaging in these incredible conversations with my science colleagues, I also thought, I think the audiences would like to have this too. So the structure of the Matter of Origins, this piece is Act 1, you're in the theater, you go to CERN, you see video with all this stuff, you get to find out about the question of measurement, which took on a big thing. A big part of the piece was, could you measure, should you measure, what were you measuring? But Act 2 is tea. The audience comes out, they sit at tea tables, there's a scientist or an artist at every table. You get her actual chocolate cake. You get a series of conversations. Drew, in fact, was a co-host in one of the rooms with the woman Tamara Pullman, who played Edith Warner. But you get a chance to think about not just what you saw in Act 1, but also the question about Los Alamos and its history, and our histories around science and art. So,
Liz, maybe you want to introduce the piece a little with some of the...
Oh, should we take a look at that real quick?
We should take a little look at
this is a funny little quick clip of a video. On our first trip to CERN, this is before they closed the tunnels. So we got into the tunnel, which you'll see. We took it down. We can go ahead and take a look at it. Here it comes. So that's the outside of CERN, and you can bring the sound up a little bit, yeah. Now, this is a film we made for the people at CERN. We sent it back to them. So here you are in one of the measuring places where they're measuring the atoms that are smashing, and Drew can tell us more about it because he was just at CERN. And this room is what is to become the computing place, which is, they have so much data, more data in one day than the Library of Congress, I think, has. Scientists talking to us about
Okay, well, this is this.
This I gotta see.
Well, I'm not sure how to.
He's going to explain
this equation to lay people, you mean, or?
Very simple, actually. I have an idea about how.
Oh, yeah, please.
You know, Butoh dancers.
He's talking about Butoh dancers.
The amazing thing that they were doing was they were slamming themselves full force against the walls of the room. Okay, do that often enough, and at some point you end up on the other side of the wall. That's what this equation tells you.
And so, in a minute, I asked the question, well, what happened? Because we were in the tunnel, and there's Ben.
We didn't go long enough.
He's not getting through the wall.
The bigger you are, the harder the wall, the harder it is for you to get through. This tunneling through the wall is not easy to do when you're a big particle.
Yeah, if you're a big particle, you can't get through. And then this is at the University of Maryland, and you'll see in this case, this is a pretty direct representational idea that we're playing with.
All of them do it. They keep bouncing against the wall again and again and again. They keep probing, in a way, the wall until at some point, by chance, randomly, they tunnel through the wall.
Now, as I was saying, I think one of the very interesting things going on with art and science is its relationship to education, the idea of embodied knowledge, and how we're going to bring excite people about both our fields. And it is true that some aspects of even this piece are illustrative, which as a contemporary artist, sometimes one is not supposed to do, but actually it's thrilling to try to figure out how to best embody this stuff, although it also is thrilling to move into the incredible abstractions that are possible.
Maybe you want to show a little bit of the abstractions you went through too, before we have to move along. We have about 5 minutes.
Do we have time for that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the other clip. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. I think it's coming. This is a section of, we played around with these 7 equations. And I asked the dancers if they could actually completely embody the equation. So it's not that you would know that, although there's a little bit in the video that suggests it. And then we're going to see how we do CERN in the context of the beginning. The idea is to try to get this as the equation comes up in a second. our scientists will know what those are. And here you're just going to hear a multiplicity of Genesis stories. First in Hebrew. You can't hardly see that, I'm sorry to say, but what is you'll begin to discern are the workers at CERN.
And there was light.
For me, placing the Genesis story with these incredible workers,
God separated the light
in the beginning, at the inception,
alongside these indigenous stories of the beginning.
before this all was the way it was, the Great Spirit, the Supreme Being, the dark raven, the holy wind, the grandfather of all things, the gods of the dream time.
I think
in the beginning,
it's not. To me, the nature of the investigation of the scientists that I've been meeting on this particular project struck me as deep as our deepest myth makers. That the people who figured out that Raven must have created the earth, they didn't do that out of nothing, maybe out of dreams, but also because they were observing, just like you guys.
Andrew, yeah, I mean, for me, one of the conversations that we had as we led up to this is, before the panel, I suggested that, you know, one of the things that artists and scientists in some ways have in common is, you know, unlike perhaps designers or engineers who think about applied research, artists and scientists work at a level of pure research. And Andrew, you said it's not even enough.
Yeah, I mean, research is necessary. You have to do your research. And in the sciences, in the physical sciences, or in any sciences, it's really hard to know anything. I mean, you ask nature a question, and it'll come back with an answer 23, and now you got to figure out what 23 means, and it's never clear. So research is sort of part of the process, but what you're really trying to get to is some sort of, you're trying to connect something together that allows you to understand nature better. And that's really hard to define, right? That's a human thing. When the little light bulb lights up, there's no algorithm to tell you that the little light bulb is lit up. So it's very subjective. It's very open to interpretation.
So I think one reason for all of this cross-discipline practice is around the idea of how we know things. For myself, coming in contact with I call it excellence to excellence. There's something that goes on in a room when people start comparing process, methods, outcomes, knowledge, all that no matter what, even if you don't make a piece that's about science, but you just go back to your own laboratory, emboldened and excited and challenged by the nature of knowledge. I think that that's one of the best things that's going on, and that's why those young people know it too. They want that.
Thank you very much, Liz and Andrew. I think that's a really fantastic way to begin our conversation. I think we could continue talking all evening, and we're going to move on to the next panel and think a bit about policy in this area too. Liz, Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Su Xiang Lim and Claire Shine to the stage, please. I hope you're already impressed by how many women we've got on stage when we're talking about art and science. Go the ladies. So we've just begun the conversation with a lovely poetic conversation with an artist and a scientist thinking about how they as practitioners delve into this field of practice. The second panel, we're going to go for a kind of transcending policy analysis and have a conversation between federal and non-government agencies and arts, emerging art, science, technology practices, and speak about things on a policy level. Joan Shigegawa, who's the Deputy Director of the National Endowment of the Arts here in Washington, D.C., will kick off the conversation. Joan, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. So, art and science used to be the same activity. Think Aristotle, or Leonardo da Vinci, or even Steve Jobs. But as a society, we too often place these endeavors into separate silos, and we've supported them as unrelated modes of inquiry, and we've just heard how deeply they really are related. So in the fall of 2010, the NEA and the National Science Foundation co-convened a summit that gathered together some of the nation's leading practitioners working at the intersection of art, science, and technology. This, which regrettably you cannot see a thing of, but anyway, this is a story map that captures those conversations. Essentially, it tells us that if we can get artists and scientists to leave their separate cultures of knowing, to cross a bridge constructed of challenges and opportunities, we can arrive as a society at a land of broader impacts built on the twin towers of intellectual merit and artistic excellence, or something like that. However, we've just heard from Liz and Drew, and they're practitioners. And practitioners do not pay any mind to what is ultimately a false dichotomy. The NEA's arts discipline directors regularly see applications for projects that stand at this exciting intersection, where Liz and Drew did their work. So I'm going to, today, for this panel, highlight three projects that we have just recently funded. So last year, Motion Institute in San Francisco, California, received a $10,000 grant from the NEA to develop and present the Kepler Project, a theatrical play about German astronomer Johannes Kepler. Written by a performance artist in collaboration with a mathematician, the Kepler Project is a groundbreaking production that integrates live theater and planetarium technology. So the production combines the full dome, immersive imagery, and computer animation that you would see if you visited a planetarium, but it combines it with live actors and with music to explore the impact of the scientific revolution on Renaissance culture and how these shifts are still being felt today. So in the play, the writer talks about a contemporary astrophysicist, and she collides with the 17th century as Kepler and Galileo appear to guide her through the emotionally charged terrain of her love life, her career, and her own radical notions of the structure of the universe and the harmony of the spheres. We've got to see that one. So now, next grant is Art Picks from Houston, Texas. They received a $15,000 grant to support the production of a series of DVDs that document performances that took place in 1966 at the 69th Street Regiment Armory in New York City. And they featured artists collaborating with scientists and engineers from Bell Labs, and many of you know about these performances. These famous performances were organized by Experiments in Art and Technology, otherwise known as EAT, and that was a nonprofit group created by the artists Robert Rauschenberg and Robert Whitman, and Bell Labs engineers, most famously Billy Kluver and Fred Wallhauer. So EAT itself was active from 1966 to 1981, and it was an exemplary model of interdisciplinary collaboration. This model aimed at establishing ongoing networks and creative partnerships among artists, scientists, and engineers who were co-exploring innovative creative practices during the early stages, think of how early this was, of the computer and information technology. So John Cage's Variation 7, which you see here, experimented with using photocells to trigger sounds as performers moved up and down the stage. The DVD series features the original performances as well as interviews with the artists, engineers, and audience members that focus on the innovations that this whole long-term experiment spawned. Name of it is 9 Evenings, Theater and Engineering, and it's currently available for purchase through Amazon.com. The third project is the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center, some of you know that, MPACT, in Troy, New York, which received an NEA grant of $35,000 to foster cross-disciplinary art, science, creative practice. MPACT was built by Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Many of you know RPI, Private Research University, as a 22,000 square foot building designed to accommodate multidisciplinary creative exchanges between artists in performing arts and experimental media and researchers in science, engineering, and technology. So if you go there, you'll find that the facilities include a theater, a concert hall, world-class concert hall actually, and artist studios. And the MPACT professional staff includes curators, stagehands, audio and video engineers, electricians, and computer programmers. The Artist in Residency program welcomes projects that explore innovative technology and media arts and or cross-pollinate the arts with science and engineering. And last year, MPACT was host to 88 individual artists. They just announced that performance artist Laurie Anderson will be their Distinguished Artist in Residence for a 3-year residency beginning in 2012. Because the artists and the scientists working at the intersections do not always recognize themselves or their work reflected in the NEA's guidelines, we have tasked our Senior Advisor of Program Innovation, Bill O'Brien, who's here somewhere in the house, to work with already existing communities of practice to let them know about our funding opportunities and to explain how they may compete within the NEA's disciplines. So heads up, everybody, and especially folks watching on the internet, our next application deadline is August 9th, 2012, and anyone interested in seeking support should review the guidelines at arts.gov. And then feel free to reach out to Bill directly at artsandscience@arts.gov. And Bill will guide you through the labyrinthian thing of applying for a federal grant at the NEA. He'll be your personal guru. Also, I should tell you that there'll be a webinar on June 14th at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And there are these little cards on there's an information table out there, and that will give you the URL to come on to the webinar and be able to do Q&A with the NEA staff. And that was also on our website. You can find that. So, Amanda, I'm going to end my remarks here, and I look forward to the discussion with Susiang and Claire. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joan. Thank you very much, Joan. We'll hopefully find some time for questions after the panel, but that was a really nice segue, Joan, of explaining, you know, our ideas around art and science being actually kind of one field of discipline that was about the kind of Renaissance man, if you like, in Leonardo's time. But really what you were talking about is the collaboration that we've recognized as required in contemporary kind of knowledge building and arts practice. So it'd be lovely to hear from you, Susiang, on the work of the NSF at the moment.
Well, thank you, but first, First, a special thank you to the Austrian Embassy for hosting this event. I'm delighted to be here to talk about the NSF's interest in the topic of today's program. The NSF is known as a science agency that funds basic research. However, that description is of a tree without foliage. The NSF has a more comprehensive mission. Its mandate is to promote progress of science, to advance health and the national health, prosperity and welfare, and to secure the nation's defense. The NSF supports efforts that transcend disciplinary boundaries in order to achieve its goals in research, education, and workforce preparation. So projects involving combinations of the arts, science, and technology have a place at the NSF. These projects tend to fall into sort of 4 broad categories of ideas, as shown in this first slide. The first is the art of knowing, art as a way of knowing. And these refers to ideas about how the arts provide pathways into understanding and exploring the world around us. The NSF is very interested in new approaches to conceptualize and to communicate science to the public and for public engagement. So Liz Lehrman's project was actually partially funded by the National Science Foundation as an example of this category of work. The second category is art in science learning and education. Here the projects apply art-based learning techniques to enhance science learning and education. The third idea is that of art, science, technology innovations through collaboration. We recognize that many innovations emerge from intersections of the arts, science, and technology areas. The NSF therefore provides support for infrastructure to optimize collaborations for sort of cross-pollination of expertise and perspectives from the different disciplines. And these can be in the form of technology-based networks or on theme-based workshops. The fourth idea is that of a science of learning in and through art. These include scientific studies of how learning occurs through the practice of the various art forms. By gaining an understanding of the effects of arts training, or the arts experience, we hope to gain an understanding of how the brain works, how these experiences affect cognition and behavior, and obviously, such an advance in understanding will allow us new perspectives about learning in general, as well as implications for enrichment of human development and well-being. I have I brought with me a short list of projects that were funded by the NSF that sort of reflects the categories of ideas that I mentioned. I would like to say then that we see the implementations of all these ideas as major contributors to the national goals with regard to innovation. These projects are funded by the various directorates within the NSF, and to just give you a flavor of what these include, there are the Education and Human Resources Directorate, the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate, the Computer and the Information Sciences Directorate, Engineering, Biological Sciences, and the Mathematical and Physical Sciences Directorates. Next, I will expand on the last topic, which is learning in and through art. And for this, I will feature work that was done by Nina Kraus at Northwestern University. Is it advancing?
Yeah.
Did I? All right. So Dr. Kraus studies the effects of music on the nervous system, particularly how music training changes sound processing in the brain. By using scalp electrodes to detect and to record through the use of scalp electrodes to detect brain waves, she demonstrated that music experience refines the brain's processing of music and of speech. So if you take a look at the first waveform, that is that of the brain's response to music and then also speech. And in the third set of waveforms here, they're looking at the response of musicians and non-musicians. And you will find that the musicians' response, which is in red, is a whole lot more, is quite a bit more robust than that of non-musicians. Okay. She then asked the question, can music experience help detect speech in noisy environments? Now, this is a very important auditory skill, and the answer is in the next slide. I'm going through this very quickly now. If you take a look at that slide, you will see the waveforms, the brain waves of musicians on the red and the brain waves of the non-musicians in the dark color. Now, in the quiet environment, the two waveforms are similar. However, in a noisy environment, you will find that the brain waves of the musicians look very much like they were in the case of the quiet environment. However, for the non-musicians, the response to speech in the noisy environment is now degraded and it's quite different and it's not so robust. So I don't have time to talk much more about this, but I will encourage you to visit Nina Krause's website, which is indicated on this slide here, which is in the beginning. And here you will see what, in addition to just speech and noise, you find that music experiences influences a variety of other non-musical brain functions. And this has, of course, implications for both education and health. And with that, I will also end here by saying that today's event is actually a very important one for allowing all of us with our diverse interests to get together to come to some conversions about where we might see some fruitful collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sis Young. That was a really lovely observation of how music directly can affect people's brainwaves and functioning in space and potentially learning experiences too. Claire, we perhaps can finish up with you if you can give us an overview of the kind of policy work that Salzburg Global is working on, thinking about art, science, and environmental issues on a global scale, and perhaps give some background on your work.
Thank you, Amanda. Well, that's a pretty big topic, so I've got to do the global environment plus arts plus science in less than 5 minutes.
You've got it. That's right.
I will do my best. And it's an enormous pleasure to be with you today. And before I go any further, I would like to thank my dear colleague Susie Seidel-Fox back in Salzburg, who's done all the heavy lifting for Salzburg to make this great event happen, and who runs our arts and culture program for several years. So I'm going to talk briefly about 3 things: who we are, give you a couple of examples of how we in our arts and culture programs try to bridge the divides with science and other disciplines, and then, perhaps rather different from my colleagues at the table here, give you some personal insights from somebody who has had the last 20 years as a professional schizophrenic. I've been working on environmental policy with a vaguely legal hat on, and in my spare time I've been the Financial Times' theatre critic in France. So yeah. Laughing is probably the best way to make it make sense. Okay, so who are we? I'll take two seconds to describe, because you may be less familiar with the Salzburg Global Seminar as a non-US based institution. We were created in 1947, and the idea of crossing boundaries is in our organizational DNA, with the product of the vision of 3 young Harvard students trying to create dialogue and exchange in the ruined aftermath of the Second World War. And we've always been about mixing genres. You see before you a Rococo palace, but Hollywood managed to get in there, and as Stephen said, they managed to film The Sound of Music in what is now my garden. The boundaries we first thought of were geopolitical ones, but in recent years, and as I now look to the future as the new Chief Program Officer, we have to think in more scientific, more philosophical, more challenging ways, because we simply don't know what the new challenges of the world ahead of us are. But we do all know that we're living in a time of very scary, shifting tectonic plates. And the more we can bring creative thinking and emotional and social resilience to our political and policy discussions, the more it can help us all. So we combine a mixture of higher education and topic-focused seminars. And as I say, the idea of the creative driver as a source of innovation for positive social impact underpins what we do. And 3 examples of recent work in our arts and culture program. Here, I'm picking these out really to try and show you the social intersection of what we're doing, how we see culture and the arts and science coming together to give added value for positive social change. Typically, our events will have about 60 people from over 30 countries. They'll be young, they'll be old, they'll be at the top of the food chain, and they'll be starting off on a life path. And the idea, even within our lovely walls, is to maximize this sharing, brainstorming, and renewal. In the case of our event that Stephen mentioned on libraries and museums in an era of participatory culture, the issue we were really exploring was who curates knowledge in this world of new technology? Who might feel threatened? The librarian used to be the voice of authority, but now you can have a kid who can master the new technologies infinitely better. And what does that mean for legitimacy? What does that mean for ownership of the creative and knowledge curation process? A more recent event was on the transformative power of music in society. And there again, our hallmark is that we brought people who represented street orchestras from South America together with composers, as in this picture, who were working with neuroscientists to explore the way in which the science and creative process came together. And in the picture there, you see Bruce Adolphe, the composer, standing up, and Fred Child, who hosts National Public Radio's Performance Today, sitting down. And Bruce's composition was performed by Yo-Yo Ma on the cello. It's called Self Comes to Mind, and the image behind is of brain activity produced by the American Museum of Natural History. And you can't really see Yo-Yo tucked away down there, but just at a quick, even that quick slide with a little too much light behind can give you an idea of that unexpected transformative power that many people in that audience used to classical music in the conventional sense have no reason to expect. And the most recent event we've had was looking at international cultural exchanges as a kind of soft power. Again, what does new technology, what are the shifting boundaries between public and private sector enable us to do in terms of building new bridges? And the picture you see there is produced by Culture Hub, which uses telepresence to connect artists in different parts of the world. And I'm going to quote you a very nice line from their program director, Billy Clark. As artists, we can look at our humanness in relation to technology and shape the future of how it's used, which makes me think about the excellent comment about wisdom just previously. We have the capacity to reach out infinitely across the globe and should capitalize on that. And here you have a topic led by Science House in New York, which focused on how artists and institutions can give shape to not just to global culture, but also the economy in the imagination age, how we can help society visualize complex ideas, and as I said, how we can use them to explore what it means to be fully human as machines become more integrated. So if Amanda will let me, I'm going to finish incredibly fast speed with something from personal experience about the interaction of society with global environmental change. And I've done this for 20 years, and I've seen how fragmented perspectives, species and sites in their little boxes, became joined up through the concepts first of biodiversity, and then how we brought cultural diversity into the piece, because we realized that the scientific joining webs were not enough because humans had to bring the glue together to make things be transformed on the ground. And you can see this in the way paradigms change for sustainable development. We started off with 3 pillars, and then we added in culture. And if we don't get the balance right, we get a lurch. You all have your own interpretation of what is or might happen at Rio +20. But the one thing we know is there will be cultural and indigenous voices represented there in a way that simply wasn't happening when the debate started in a scientific way. And 2 final examples of how artists respond to these global challenges. Many of you here may know about Tipping Point, whose slogan is energizing the response to climate change. And the photo there is their artwork of a funeral for lost species. And my last slide, from personal experience of invasive alien species, a highly controversial subject, well known to you, those of you in the US, which challenges both biologists and people on the cultural side. The challenges on the biological side and for ecosystems are obvious, but the problem is that we don't have the terminology in our human language, and so we're needing artists to find a way of navigating scary concepts like alien to make scientists and policymakers find a place on the same space, on the same page. And so artists can actually mediate ways in which we can become better at talking to one another on difficult issues. So final couple of challenges, which I leave on the slide here with thanks to Amanda for her patience. The challenge now, from a policy perspective, is how we break out of silos and how we take risks in trying to listen to those with whom we haven't necessarily been co-educated, and how we can reposition imagination within education in an age where league tables and fear of future jobs is dominating most parents' perspectives, including my own. So thanks for your attention, and sorry to have taken too long.
Claire, I think that was a really fantastic summing up, and I don't think you took too long at all. I think we're all, I mean, I could continue on this, with this panel for as long as we continued with the first panel today, talking about policy. One of the key things that, for me, that came up through all of your presentations was the idea that silo knowledge is something that we clearly need to overcome, that we need to work out ways of bridging boundaries and making bridges between the various disciplines that we represent, that amateur knowledge and understanding other people's other specialist discipline is something that we really need to think about, and that kind of collaborative, participatory knowledge building is something that will only enhance both the sciences and the arts and our understanding of culture. So thank you very much, ladies, for your presentations. Thanks, Joan, thanks, Su-Xiang, and thanks, Claire. And now we'll be moving on to our third presentation for the evening. Through all of So for the third panel, and hopefully to open up what I think will be an interesting discussion to talk about all of the various ideas that we've been hearing about this afternoon and into this evening, we have Joel Slayton representing 01 Festival in San Jose. And in fact, it's not just a festival. He'll be talking to you about the infrastructure that he's currently building to make a robust and sustainable organisation and infrastructure. And Manuela Naveau, who's here representing the Ars Electronica Centre. Manuela is the director of Ars Electronica Export, I think, thinking about international strategies for a really seminal and very important festival, but also cultural centre in Linz in Austria. So I think we're going to begin the presentation with Manuela, is that right? Yeah, great. Manuela, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you very much for the invitation. As Amanda already mentioned, I'm from Austria, from Linz. I'm actually born in Linz, so I'm a real Linzer. Ars Electronica is an institution that is dealing on the intersection of art, technology, society since 1979 already. And I will begin with an overview about Ars Electronica and will then speak a little bit about our experience with these interdisciplinarity works. Yeah, we are based in Linz. Actually, Linz is a small city compared now to Washington and to cities in the US. So we have 190,000 inhabitants. And Linz is also between Salzburg and Vienna that are both very well known. Linz had bad reputation because of Second World War, you might know. Linz has steel industry, Linz has a lot of air pollution in the 60s, and Linz had to work a lot in order to find its identity in the situation between Salzburg and Vienna. So we had very clever politicians in the 70s, and they focused very early not on history and an art history like in Salzburg and Vienna, more on the future. And as technology was always in Linz because of a lot of companies, the politicians were cleverly focusing on art and technology already in 1979 when we had the first Ars Electronica Festival. Always when I'm doing guided tours in our museum, I'll always ask, like, who of you had a computer in the beginning of the 80s? And Linz, we're very proud that Linz actually had a festival on computer art already in 1979. I make a quick going through all these festivals, now over 33 years, always focusing on the intersection of art, technology and society. We had topics like digital dreams, out of control, the world from inside, Endo Nano, already in the beginning of the 90s, artificial life, genetic arts, intelligent environments, the mythos of information, welcome to the wild world, Nemesis, flash factor, information machine, Infowar, information power war, life sciences, then coming in the beginning of 2000, next sex, and the art of reproduction, take over, who is doing the art of tomorrow, unplugged, code, the language of our time, time shift when we had 25 years of Ars Electronica in 2004, the topic of hybrid, living in a paradox, simplicity, the art of complexity, goodbye privacy, a new cultural economy, human nature, repair, can we be saved? And the question of origin in 2011. And this will be the festival this year, which has the topic of the big picture and is focusing in general that also on this complexity of our world, on our globalized, networked world, where we actually have no center of power anymore, because the power is coming from totally different groups and commons that are pumping up from the internet, and totally new digital communities are coming up. So we are questioning, what is the big picture? Does a big picture exist? How does it look like? And which new ways of visualization do we approach in our future? Here, actually, I start with my presentation. So Ars Electronica, I already mentioned the festival was initiated in 1979. We have a competition, which is actually very well known, the pre-Ars Electronica, where a lot of American artists, I think the biggest amount of artists we have in our database is from America, and we were very proud about that. And the pre-Ars Electronica was initiated in '87 already. In 1996, it was the first time that we had actually a museum. Before, we only had a festival, which is always in the first week of September, and the competition. But in 1996, we had the first time also something like a house where we can present all these artists, where we can have the contact to the local people. And in 2009, when Linz was European Cultural Capital, we even opened the new house that you saw in the slide before. For us, the Ars Electronica Center has a very special duty, which we have to translate all these projects that are coming from the artists, that are coming from creative technologists and from scientists to the people, to the local people. And this is a very important issue for us, because the people in Linz, the people from around Linz, from Austria, and even from the neighbor countries, it's very important for us to bring them into the topics that we are focusing on a very professional level at the Ars Electronica Festival, on a very artistic level at the pre-Ars Electronica, and at a very research and scientific level at the Ars Electronica Future Lab. So we opened an exhibition which was called The New Views of Humankind, and we're very proud that in 2011 we had nearly 180,000 visitors. Hands-on is the key word for us in our museum. It's important, so we decided to have labs, we call it labs, but it's actually a way to transport all this information to the people. So we have a RoboLab, where we actually are presenting the status quo of robotic art, but also we are presenting how robotic engineering is already a state of the art in medicine, or in, for example, when people are for robotic surgery, or when robotics are used for surgery or for prosthesis. We have a biolab where we go into the microcosmos of biological phenomena, also when it comes to images. And we give the people the possibility even to clone plants. We have a brain lab where we're providing to the people possibility to have access to know how the brain is working, how the eyes are working, and we are even better equipped than so many other eye doctors, so that the doctors are already sending their clients in our museum, because here in a museum they can not only make a picture of the retina, they can even, the Future Lab developed a special application so that the visitors can send the picture of the retina home via email. And we have a fab lab, of course, for people to bring them into all these creative processes, to give them a basic training on all the graphic programs that are existing, on 3D modeling, and even to provide equipment, a 2D cutter, and even a 3D printer to build their own objects they want to do. And the very special case that we have at the Ars Electronica Center, and where we're really very proud of, is the deep space. We got rid of the cave, so we don't have cave technology anymore, but we extended it, so we have a 3D environment plus HD possibility to show projects in real 16:9, because we figured out that a lot of people are already doing HD, even like personal video, documenting and so on, but nearly nobody has the possibility to see all this in real size, like real 16:9, and we're very proud to have this space. We're using this space not only to show applications from the Future Lab, we're also using this space to, again, search the direct contact to the people, to invite them every Thursday and give them the deep space as a stage for their pictures, for their topics they want to present. And every Thursday we have, so people, like normal people can come to us, can approach us and can say, okay, I have a special topic, I have a special archive of old views on Linz or whatever, and I provided this in a very special application. So we give this as a stage to the audience in order to present the topics they want to, with their focus. Of course, we could not afford all these interesting new projects if we would not have a research and development lab, which is the Ars Electronica Future Lab, that is developing most of the projects that are in our center. And the Ars Electronica Future Lab is this place where interdisciplinarity were taking place from the beginning, also from 1996, when we initiated the Ars Electronica Future Lab. And for us, interdisciplinarity, and with our experience of interdisciplinarity, we always focused on the topic of translation, because for us interdisciplinarity is of course a basis in order to collide different minds, to collide interesting minds of the artists, of scientists, of theoreticians, of architects and so on. But all this needs a lot of translation, all this needs a lot of contextualization, and all this needs a lot of support. So interdisciplinarity for us is always very important, but it needs a lot of work in order to keep it alive. I shortly want to focus that we collaborated with CERN, like Liz already mentioned, she collaborated with CERN, with this huge particle physics institution in Genf, in Genève, in Switzerland. They knocked on our door in 2010, and they wanted to collaborate with us. So what we did is we so parts of the Future Lab not only visited, of course, CERN and got in contact with the scientists there. We built a whole exhibition about like what is happening, what was happening at the Big Bang, and actually how can we, for example, what can artists get out of it, and like what is taking place if really there's this collide of different minds. And we did an exhibition in our Ars Electronica Future Lab in order to translate all this information, what's going on in CERN, on the one hand to the public, on the other hand, on an artistic level, transport some new ways of how people can see things, or how people can envision some things. This exhibition was not the only one. We also, the most important thing is that together with CERN we created a competition, which is the Collide at CERN Pre-Ars Electronica Award. And we've been totally proud that a very well-known German artist, Julius von Bismarck, which is actually a relative from Bismarck, got this residency grant. And what he is now doing, he's really searching the contact with the scientists at CERN, and he's making interventions with them. So he's putting them in totally dark rooms, letting them collide in a real way, and he's like doing different things with the scientists, and they are not even prepared for this. So he's not only getting in contact with them and asking them about their work and so on, he's really like making performances and interventions in CERN with the scientists. This is I have to say, this is a 2 months residency at CERN, and then he will be 1 month at Ars Electronica Future Lab. And with all the experience he had at CERN, he will come to the Ars Electronica Future Lab and will work on this process then afterwards again. So this brings me now to the last point. When I mentioned that it's very important that it's interdisciplinarily need a translation, and I really want to say that Ariane Köck, who is the program manager of the artistic program at CERN, she's really also one of the person that is focusing totally on this process. She's doing speed dating between artists and scientists, and she's really the driving force in translating also or providing the ground for translation of scientific background and artistic background, which is, you can imagine, totally difficult for them to work together. And as all this work has also been contextualized, we are very happy that within this year, Ars Electronica will open its Ars Electronica archives. So since 2004, 2005, we are storing, we are documenting all media artworks that we have not collected but documented since 1979. We now have more than nearly 120,000 entries on 60 terabytes, what you see here. And this is also the source, the possibility to give to artists, to scientists, to creative technologies, to see what happened and when, and to frame and contextualize what they do. We're not only documenting artistic work, we're also documenting interesting articles, interesting phenomena of this special year, where they happened. So it's really a source for these persons to frame and contextualize this, have the possibility to contextualize this, what they are doing. Yes, it will be online, so parts of it will be online, so nearly everybody can have access, but really to have deep access, you have to come to our archive. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I think for me, the most important thing is really that interdisciplinarity is absolutely important, but it needs a lot of work concerning translation, concerning contextualization, and also concerning support in order to keep it vivid and alive, because we know a lot of projects that just collide for once and then not anymore. So I think it's also our job as a curator to keep these projects vivid and alive.
Thank you very much, Manuela. And thanks for a fantastic overview of what truly is a remarkable centre, the Ars Electronica Centre, and its programs. Joel, perhaps you were going to give us an introduction to the programs that you're running at 01.
Ever since I can remember, I've been transcending borders. How many of you have transcended borders? That's what I thought. I don't know what it is about a person that is in their DNA that causes them to look at the world that way. I don't know for myself if it was, you know, my strange adolescence, or not fitting in college and trying to find the right path, or being a budding entrepreneur or artist, but that quest has always been really at the heart of what I've been doing in my own professional career as an artist, as a professor, as a researcher, a curator, and a cultural organizer. The ambition has been that of the provocateur. I think the artist has a very important role to play in that scheme, not just to cross borders, but to challenge them and engage them in new ways, with the goal of being to organize new systems, new networks that serve to engage and catalyze and serve as context and opportunity for artistic experimentation that otherwise might not happen. And that's been on both a personal level, but also on an institutional level, that I've tried to put that to practice. You know, what art and science have in common, and we've heard a good deal about this today, is this common quest for knowledge and a very deep and resonating respect for the role of creativity. But we also understand that one size does not fit all, but that also making knowledge and having knowledge and sharing knowledge are not the same thing. There really is a question of meaning, which of course can be both personal and cultural and discipline specific. And almost always meaning emerges from conversation, from dialogue, from interaction. On my way to when I was thinking about this presentation and how to begin, I was looking at some numbers, and here are two numbers that say something about sustainability and literacy. The first number is the number of emails sent on May 29th. The second number is the world's population. And when I looked at these numbers, I thought to myself, holy crap. What do we do about that? And at the same time, a kind of wondrous expectation of the possible. I showed these to my wife, Lisa, who is a scientist, and we kind of went through the wormhole together, an argument that lasted for hours. The point is, it's about interpretation. It's not just about producing information. You know, we live in the most challenging of times. Globalization, climate and environmental change, societal conflicts, resource scarcity, human rights, sustainability, the digital divide, and the list just goes on and on. These issues really do require a resetting of the creative register anew. And never before has the need for creative thinking and innovation been in such demand. At 01, we believe that artists who are at the leading edge of science and technology really can help us not just develop a more resilient world, but develop a deeper and more critical understanding of who we are and what the alternative futures that we are casting for ourselves imply. One's not just another cultural institution. It's a network of people and organizations. And when we think about ourselves, we sort of map it out by understanding that the network's not linear. It really is a complex network of different systems, different organizations, institutions, people who, as an organization, 01 has an opportunity to facilitate and broker relationships between in order to create these new platforms that give rise to new forms of creativity. But like Lintz, we were born of context, born of Silicon Valley. And if you've been to Silicon Valley, if you haven't been to Silicon Valley, there it is. Yes, it's a world center for technology and research development, amazing universities, great cultural centers. But Silicon Valley is also as much an idea as it is a place. A borderless region of networked corporate campuses, interconnecting freeways, urban centers, and suburbs. The there of Silicon Valley is pretty soft. And one of the roles that 01 plays in terms of creative placemaking is to begin to put a face on this, what I would describe as a postmodern city. So what we do. In 2006, we began a biennial of contemporary arts at this intersection of art, technology, and science. And we are now planning for this fall the opening of the 212 biennial, the fourth iteration. I'm going to run through a set of images just to sort of give you a taste of the kinds of projects that have been commissioned for the Contemporary Art Biennial. This was Akira Hasegawa, who did a massive image projection onto the Richard Meyer Architecture City Hall in San Jose that was driven by genetic algorithms that turned the architecture into a liquid field of visual transformation. Or Mark Hansen and Ben Rubin's project Listening Post, which samples from chat rooms and blogs language that's being used and presents it in an installation format with sound that plays out in a kind of orchestra of sensory experience. Or Graham Harwood's project with Richard Wright called Tantalum Memorial that used old Stroger switches, which were the original telephone switching network switches, to reassemble a memorial to both celebrate and bring attention to an amazing phenomena of the use of a material that's used in every single cell phone manufactured, found in just a few regions of the world, the Congo being one of those, which has created a massive power struggle over a very important resource that all of us have in our pocket. To last year's biennial, where we commissioned Todd Chandler and Jeff Stark to create an indoor urban drive-in movie theater, where recycled automobiles were fully wired, creating the primary stage for our video and film program throughout the biennial. What else we do? We've embarked on a new initiative called the 01 Garage, Silicon Valley's newest garage, a 10,000 square foot space in downtown San Jose that will serve as an environment and launch pad for risk takers from the arts, from business, from academic sectors to interact and spur innovative change. It's part think tank, part incubator, accelerator, and part exhibition space, and an open platform for the public to look behind the scenes of the skunk works of what is Silicon Valley. It's a place to see stuff, make stuff, and experience stuff. And that's what artists do. The purpose of the garage is to both inspire and provide an environment for creation, but most importantly, provide an environment for collaboration. The model for the garage really centers around the design of a fellowship program that will unveil at this year's biennial with the introduction of our first 5 fellows that will grow over the next 5-6 years into a very robust professional network of individuals who have been given the opportunity to work with Silicon Valley companies on innovation challenges that are defined by 01 and our partnering corporations. And just to give you a very brief idea of what that might look like, the project here is done by a group called Green Meme out of Los Angeles. On the hillsides near San Jose, there are these old oak grove forests that are part of the UC Berkeley reserve system, which are fully wired from micro to macro level, generating immense amounts of data about the environment as a way of tracking and looking at climate change, among many other issues. We've commissioned a group of artists to come and use that data to figure out a way to represent it to the public on site in downtown San Jose in a new center that will be built with a high-speed rail station that links it with other parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. But we also have projects underway with Google and Adobe. As partners, the Google Cultural Policy Group will be commissioning an artist to look at cultural policy changes as they relate to the future of what the internet will feel and look like as a creative workspace for this next generation of workers. And the Adobe Creative Technologies Lab has opened their doors to bring in an artist who will be given the charge to do what you think is next. So this year's biennial program is called Seeking Silicon Valley, and it really is an attempt to try to make sense out of this place, non-place that is world-renowned as the center of, as an epicenter of creativity and innovation. We have 42 organizational partners that are part of our network that span from San Jose to San Francisco, including San Francisco Museum of Modern Art to the Berkeley Art Museum and many other players, but also national and international partners. We're working with Media City Seoul and the Ural Industrial Biennial in co-commissioning of projects for this year's event. We've commissioned over 100 artists to produce new works for the biennial, and there's a short sample. Obviously, I can't go into each and every one of those, but I did want to give you a sort of brief look at some of the projects that will be on display. And please do remember that everything that I'm showing you really is concepts by artists for what they're going to do. It's not the actual projects. So Shuli Chang has a work called Baby Work, which uses a mechanical arm that smashes keyboards until they peel apart, and then the public can interact by picking up the individual keys and replacing them into the installation to generate sound. Or Lynn Hirschman-Leeson's newest project, Present Tense, which really is a deep look at the transformation in global water, in terms of pollution and toxicity, and film with babies swimming in the water as it. I have my 2-minute mark. Here I go. Ready? Okay. Lucy, this is Stephanie Saijuka's project. It's dealing with a variety of IP issues by creating a reading room that's composed of texts that are confronting those issues. Michael Najar's project that uses NASDAQ data to drive the simulation of artificial landscapes, the creation of those. Maurice Benayal is building a virtual tunnel to connect Media City Seoul and downtown San Jose, which will allow you to sort of peel through an archive of art historical imagery and have conversations with those on the other side. We also have a 9 evenings program. Pretty cool, huh? So the 9 evenings is a celebration of the project with Robert Rauschenberg and Billy Kluver's original 9 evenings. But we basically coordinated with another set of institutions throughout the Bay Area that will run this performance program throughout the biennial timeframe. One example is Alonzo King's Lines Ballet and the collaboration with Jim Campbell. Future City Labs using open and public data to create a large architectural outdoor display of light and physical form. Manifest AR working with augmented reality, imposing new realities on corporate Silicon Valley campuses for public art that didn't exist. A project with a group called Art Here out of the GAFTA program in San Francisco that has online curatorial capacity for individuals to match site-specific business locations with installation works. And Rafael Lozano-Hammer's project at the San Francisco MoMA that is called Frequency and Volume. It's an amazing project that looks at the shutdown of radio by the Mexican government in Chiapas a few years back. So it just gives you a general idea. This last project is really kind of important for us because it shows, in a way, what is possible in Silicon Valley. We've commissioned Jer Thorpe and Mark Hansen in collaboration with eBay to produce an on-site project on their campus that will look at a data visualization of eBay social commerce. And this is really quite an unusual opportunity, and we're looking at building out this program over the next coming years to include a variety of other partners. So, that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
A huge thank you, Joel, for giving us really a taste and an overview of so many of the different kind of discipline areas that contemporary artists, technologists and scientists are working in. And really, in a sense, I think both Manuela and Joel, what you did is talk about the diversity of practices that so many artists and scientists are working in, the labs and the way that we try to bring people together in different physical environments, which is really important, as well as the kind of virtual environments that we bring people together in, with issues as broad-ranging as, IP issues to environmental concerns, concepts around physics, ideas about virtuality and different ways that we're playing. And it's almost like there's almost too much information there to really think about how we actually open up a discussion around that. And I think, Manuela, one of the things that you said in your conversation and then you concluded with reiterating was the idea that part of our work as cultural workers, as practitioners, scientists, artists, policymakers, is to think about the fact that whilst we're really interested in this idea of cross-disciplinary collaboration, it requires a lot of work to nurture it. And how we need to, one of the things that we're thinking about and that I hope we're, in this kind of context, we can open up a discussion about is how do we nurture those collaborations? Because the idea of the kind of Renaissance Leonardo da Vinci who does all of the art and science all by himself is simply we understand that it's no longer viable. The words that I've heard over and over again through everybody's presentation tonight is collaboration, participation, cross-disciplinary practice. Maybe, Manuela, you can just talk about some of the ways that you do at the Arts Centre, or pipe in also, Joel, about ways that you've thought about ways of how you facilitate those cross-cultural and cross-disciplinary collaborations to make them work so that they're not one-offs that disappear at the end of time.
Yeah, I think this is the crucial point that we figured out at the Future Lab. So to bring them together once and twice, it's quite easy, but to have an ongoing process and ongoing research results, and I think this is it needs a lot of time and a lot of patience, and it needs a good network. And I think this is also artists, they have wonderful ideas and they have wonderful possibilities to transform information, but they also need somebody. Sometimes when we bring them together with scientists, they don't understand them. So they really need somebody to bring them the information in a way so that they can work with it. Because even sometimes scientists are not able to speak about their research and their work, so that really somebody can work with it. So they need translators, and they need a person to really focus, and not only to focus on what they're doing, also to translate it to the artist, but also the other way around. So the artist, we have to translate sometimes the artist to the scientist, so that they understand what they really actually are doing. And this is the one thing. And the nice thing is that we really try on, for example, also for me, for the Ars Electronic exhibitions that we're doing internationally, for each exhibition, I really try to save a small amount of money in order to do something new. Because I think there are so many curators out there, and so many people can do exhibitions. If you have the network, if you know the artworks, it's easy to do something. But really to make a new project for a special exhibition with a topic, I think it's very difficult. But what we are doing is really to organize at least once a month a meeting, so that people come together. That, for example, we offer possibility. We say, okay, now we are planning to do an exhibition in Osaka, for example, what we did last year. And for this project in Osaka, it's all about also like audience participation and crowd participation. Would be nice to develop a project, an artistic project that is accompanying the whole exhibition, which could be an add-on for the whole exhibition project, but it is which is a new research project and combines the research people from the Future Lab, different disciplines. And I try to find these possibilities and give these options then also to the Future Lab, so that people can come into this exhibition project not only with an existing artwork, but also with a new development for an exhibition. And yeah, this is a very special case that just happened in December, for example.
I think that's interesting. Joel, I'm really interested that you're one of the programs that you're setting up as a fellowship program. And because we didn't really have time for discussion with the other panels, guys, I'm going to try and bring you into the discussion a little bit here too. Is that, Joel, you spoke of the fellowship program that you're setting up, and the industry collaboration that you're setting up with Silicon Valley, and that's definitely about, you know, the physical place you are. But I think these collaborations is something that I saw come up over and over again. Well, I previously ran the IBEAM, which is an art and technology centre in New York City, and we had many conversations with the Ars Electronica Future Lab, but what we found is most of those conversations really were initiated by the people who'd been fellows at IBEAM and the people who'd been fellows at the Ars Electronica Centre. So that was really the practitioners, those one-on-one conversations that really made things happen. When I set up previously at the Australian Network for Art and Technology conversations between artists and scientists, it was really the institutional collaborations that we set up that were successes. It was exactly the personal conversations that were set up between an artist and a scientist who really had something in common, and we saw that happening with our early conversations. Liz, you know, your work has really been about the personal connections you've made with many of the scientists you've worked with. And I'm also interested in this idea of the kind of fellowship program that we're looking at in a range of different ways. Claire, you spoke of the fellowship program that the Salzburg Global runs, and the fellowship program for me in a way is a way of how do you bring a cohort together, how do you bring a group of peers together who can have those conversations. So there are a few conversations that I'd love any of you, Joel, or any of the former panelists to pick up on.
Well, may I begin just to, so, you know, we kind of glossed over things very quickly, or at least I did, you know, to show you a large sample very quickly without really getting into specifics. But the fellowship program, there are a couple premises. One, the 01 is assuming. One is that we're not investing in artists for one-offs, period. We're building long-term relationships that we intend to sustain over a period, so that even though an individual comes into the fellowship program, they exit as an alumni, and that alumni enters into a professional network that then is supported through other kinds of programming and other kinds of opportunities for engagement and professional development that keeps them as part of our family, if you were. Also, it's a way that the network itself expands. The second thing is that, and I think Manuela sort of points to this, is that there is a responsibility on the part of the organization to operate as broker. Often the artists, the scientists, the technologists, the corporations, the academic centers, other cultural institutions that you are partnering with to create the kinds of platforms that provide this opportunity for experimentation that we're referencing. There's a lot of work to be done there to manage those relationships and to manage them in such a way that the artist and their collaborators are given the utmost respect for their expertise and the knowledge that they're bringing to the table, but at the same time the institution or the organization, the organizational knowledge is being deployed in their support. And it's a complex system, of course, and as I tried to allude in the beginning, there's no one-size-fits-all for every instance. Every relationship is unique, every opportunity is unique, and what we as 01 is trying to do is to create an environment that creates a sustaining relationship with all the parties that are involved.
Thanks. Liz, do you want to talk, are you able to talk at all about the reason that you actually, how you develop relationships in that cross-disciplinary way as a practitioner, perhaps?
Well, I think, hi everybody, it's been 2 hours. I think the idea that collaboration and partnership has come up so often today is interesting in light of the myths that scientists and artists live with. The myths of our training, which suggests that it's an individual brilliance, it's a genius that comes out of what? Somewhere. And yet, in this world now, it's a different side of ourselves that's being called into work. So I thought both Manuel and Joel spoke about the idea of brokering, which is extremely helpful, but it's also true that the artists and the scientists have to change. And that's part of what makes it interesting, is how, for example, the scientists now, getting to know them a little bit, you know, one of the things they keep talking about, they're so busy being in teams that they wonder how they can get a Nobel Prize anymore. So, for example, the reward systems aren't structured to actually support the nature of the change that's going on. And I think, Joan, you were talking about that at the NEA, that we have to just switch up how that works. For myself, I love that you're talking long-term, Joel, because all of these partners, this takes years and years. I'm into my 9th year at Wesleyan University, which began, that's a partnership, I come and go. And it began because the scientists were at one end of the campus, the artists were at the other, and some brilliant person there, Pam Tadji, thought maybe we could do something to bring the campus together. So it's long-term, deep, and full of change, and I mean change for everybody.
Claire, perhaps, yeah.
Yes, I'd like to pick up on what Amanda was saying about the power of the personal. And as Stephen said, we have this global fellowship of over 20,000 people. And the one common thing that binds them is that they come together in this absolutely magical cultural heritage spot, and they have a transformative experience. We light the spark, and we don't know what to do with that when they all go back to their separate corners of the world. So the really big challenge for us now, and this is where technology comes in, is how we can reinvent and transform what we brought together to make it a lifelong learning experience, a lifelong enrichment, by creating these virtual platforms and by keeping these people from their different disciplines together and hopefully bringing them back for a process of creative renewal. But we're exploring that at the moment, and all ideas welcome.
Thanks very much, Claire. Now, I've got 1,000 other questions that I could ask of the panellists, but I think that would be dreadfully selfish of me, that I should open up to the floor for any questions that any of you might have for either Joel or Manuela or previous panellists. I can see a gentleman's hand go up here. I think we've got Andreas and Andrea with microphones. No, there's one coming towards you here, sir. And if you could introduce yourself, perhaps.
Yes. My name's John Gardenier. I'm a science and statistical ethicist, but that is not what I want to say. Of course, first of all, from the audience point of view, we're very, very grateful to all of the sponsors and all of the speakers for what has been a marvelous, eye-opening program. So that's, I'm sure that many people who won't speak from the audience would want me to say that. Now, what I will say is that while all of this is exciting, I was surprised that one aspect of art seems to be totally missing, one that's been very important to me, and that is the art of prose. Now, that's sort of a left-brain thing as compared to the audio and visual things that we've been hearing about, which are more right-brained, but they can be very, very enlightening, instructive, awe-inspiring. I was particularly impressed by Richard Feynman's 6 Easy Lessons, which I found the most clear, wonderful, elementary book in introducing people to science. I would love to see that illustrated by electronic arts people or something like that. Of course, there's been great work done in science fiction as well, some of it explaining actual science. So I would just encourage everybody, in addition to the fine work that's being done in the audio and visual arts, to consider prose, good prose, as an essential part of this overall fabric.
I think you're absolutely right, sir, and I think one of the things that I've been struggling with here today has been hearing about so much fantastic work, from choreography to dance and performance to music and sound, and I think that text and prose is, of course, core to that. In fact, I would argue that many of the projects that we've heard about have actually been about new narratives and how we think about text and prose in new and different ways. But I think that's a really lovely point, but one that, you know, with a 3-day conference we may have been able to cover. I do know that there's one in Switzerland, there's a wonderful museum of science fiction that also deals with this area in fabulous ways. I think it's a terrific point. Thank you. Joel.
But just to take your comment one step further, because I totally agree, and it's certainly not the only area of creative activity that we skipped over, you know, in our short presentation. At the same time, there's sort of this notion as well that's been tabled about how the arts are changing, and I think that's a very significant, important observation. I mean, 15 years ago, we really wouldn't have looked at social practice as an art form in the same way that we do today. And again, the sort of innovations and experiments that are being conducted or played out through these collaborations that sort of provoke the edges of what's possible are also helping us reveal new areas of artistic practice and artistic function that didn't really exist before. And so we don't always know what we're looking at, I guess is my point. Not always. And sometimes those things that are sort of right there on the fringe or right there on the edge, they could be science, they could be art, they could be something else, you know? And that stuff I think is really, really interesting and something we need to keep a very close eye on.
Thanks, Joel. There's a question just up here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay, I guess it's on. I needed to speak up. I just wanted to point out one thing, and it's only because I wouldn't have asked the question because there's so many people here with probably great questions. But on Saturday, I concluded a year of sitting on a panel that was organized by a foundation called the Interactivity Foundation. And the topic was the future of the arts and society. And after they set up 2 different groups, and then they had a control group in Wisconsin of people that were kind of more different from, you know, city people. And in the end, it was the question that we kind of concluded was important was, and we used a metaphor called the lighthouse, and it was the question of NEA. And so this is the reason I kind of bring this question. You're talking about collaboration and fellowships, and ultimately a big question came around about money. Who's paying for all this? How do you get it done? What is the role of the lighthouse? And how big can it get without encroaching on the autonomy of artists and pure art? That's kind of my question.
That's a very good question. I don't have the answers to it, but I think that all of the panelists today spoke in very different ways. I think Joel has just spoken about industry partnerships that he's developing, and Joel and I, if I may speak for you, Joel, have had many interesting conversations about what it means for us as cultural workers, as cultural producers, to think about the kind of relationships we need to develop to make sustainable organisations and sustainable research. And it varies depending on the circumstance that you're working in. Manuela talked a lot about the industry work that the Future Lab do at the Ars Electronica Centre, that both provide the resources to the museum, but also income in order to continue the museum, and they will do industry work as well as creative work. I think that, you know, we've heard from the NEA and the NSF, and, you know, the government's role in funding experimental research and development in this field is critical to the success of the field. There's some of the threads that I could see coming up through the course of conversation. I don't know if any of the other panelists, either on the floor or on the stage, want to speak to that. As somebody who's been the executive director and the executive producer of various festivals and organisations around the world, it's always the hard question.
We're building a new space. And of course, you know, fundraising is probably the thing I do most in life these days, it seems like. I guess part of the way that my perspective at looking at this issue is that the world's changing, and arts institutions and art organizations and academic institutions and research centers are also changing. The way that they are formulated, the way they operate, the way that they cooperate with one another. And we're all looking for alternative models for what the fiscal frameworks for these kinds of enterprises can be shaped around. In the case of 01 specifically, we've been looking at our partnerships with industry specifically around the need to have a deeper and more resonating understanding of the potentials of creativity, generally speaking. And so, I mean, artists bring to the table in that kind of discourse what I would describe as they bring the radical experimentation to the table. And it's a very important part of risk-taking culture in in corporate Silicon Valley at least. And we're looking at how we can cooperate around that issue. And so to keep it focused and not to become what, quote, you know, sort of unpure in the process, the kinds of innovation challenges that we mediate with our partners really are focused on those things that are going to make the world a better place. And if they're not, we don't do them.
I've got Manuela at my side, kind of prodding me to want to respond, but I think we have to wrap up our conversation here. We've had a fantastic conversation. I know that we have refreshments that are being provided by the Austrian Cultural Forum.
So maybe we can continue then while drinking wine.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to suggest, Manuela. Before we do break, I'd really like to make a special thank you to Hans-Peter Munz, the Ambassador of Austria to the United States, and this fantastic venue that we're in. Thank you to Rocco Landesman and Stephen Salyer from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Salzburg Global, respectively, for hosting this fantastic conversation and bringing such an amazing array of people together. And my special thanks to Liz, to Andrew, to Joan, Susiang, Claire, Manuela and Joel for wonderful presentations and a great conversation. I hope you'll all join us for the drinks which have been provided by the Austrian Cultural Forum here in Austria. They're on their way out. All of the panelists I know would be excited to have a conversation with you, so please join us for a drink and a conversation. Thank you, everybody.